families, workers, and renewable energy.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in this House in support of the motion put forward by my colleague, the member from Victoria. The NDP motion calls for the government to stop using Canadian taxpayers' money to subsidize the oil and gas companies and to instead reinvest that money into renewable energy and measures to help Canadians with the rising cost of living. The motion couldn't come, actually, at a more desperately needed time. This week, constituents in my riding are paying over $2 a litre of gas at the pump. Many of the people scraping together the necessary funds to pay for the fuel are essential workers, small business owners, families with young children, or people with mobility challenges who need to drive for their livelihoods or to access essential goods and services. Canadian families are already struggling with sky-high housing costs and the income precarity exacerbated by the ongoing pandemic. Even before the rise in gas prices, people are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to make ends meet. Retirees and people on fixed incomes have not seen a rise in income to account for the rise in living costs. By glaring contrast, the oil and gas companies are making record profits while being heavily subsidized by taxpayers' money. This grossly unjust situation is a direct result of the government's heavily misaligned priorities. The NDP motion calls on the government to fix this dire situation and place people and the planet before the oil and gas companies' profits. As Canadians are struggling more than ever, we are also faced with the most urgent crisis of our time, the climate change crisis. The most recent IPCC report states, and I quote, "It is unequivocal that climate change has already disrupted human and natural systems." It goes on to say, and I quote, "Societal choices and actions implemented in the next decade determine the extent to which medium and long-term pathways will deliver higher or lower climate resilient development." It notes, importantly, climate resilient development prospects are increasingly limited if current greenhouse gas emissions do not rapidly decline, especially if the 1.50 degrees global warming is expected in the near term. In a new climate update issued by the World Meteorological Organization, it pointed out that there is a 50-50 chance that the annual average global temperature will temporarily reach 1.50 degrees above the pre-industrial level for at least one of the next 5 years, and this likelihood is increasing with time. Just think about that for 1 minute. They are saying we are not going to meet our target. I should not need to remind anyone in this House the importance of the 1.5 degrees mark. Climate scientists have long established that holding the global warming to 1.5 degrees could limit the most dangerous and irreversible effects of climate change. And currently, our global temperatures have already risen by 1.1 degrees since pre-industrial levels. We are already feeling the devastating effects of climate change. And BC, my province, has just experienced one of the most challenging years of extreme weather in recent memory, with a heat dome that shattered temperature records and killed hundreds of people, followed by weather bombs that destroy critical infrastructure, livestock, and agricultural lands with record precipitation and floods. For days, BC was cut off from the rest of Canada by rail and road from the damages from the unprecedented floods. Left unchecked, extreme weather connected to a climate change will continue to wreak havoc on Canadian lives and livelihoods. And across the globe, we are witnessing how climate change has caused substantial damages in terrestrial, freshwater, and coastal and open ocean marine ecosystems. We are seeing the melting of glaciers, changes in some mountains, and permafrost thaw in Arctic ecosystems. So let's be clear, this is a result of human-induced climate change. That's why we must fight the climate crisis like we mean to win. Yet despite the urgency of the climate crisis on our doorsteps, Canada has failed to meet any of its climate targets to reduce carbon emissions over the last 40 years. In fact, not only has Canada repeatedly failed to meet its climate targets, Canada is also one of the few wealthy countries where carbon emissions continue to rise. Industrialized and wealthy nations are responsible for most greenhouse gas emissions of the world, but the effects of climate change impact developing nations and Indigenous peoples the hardest. Climate justice is justice, period. Continuing to subsidize oil and gas companies while delaying the economic and infrastructural overhaul and transition to green energy is the very opposite of climate leadership that Canadians and the world so desperately need. The new carbon capture tax credit, which in effect is a $2.6 billion subsidy to oil and gas disguised as a so-called climate solution by the Liberal government, it is the wrong path to take. Earlier this year, more than 400 Canadian climate scientists and academics pleaded with the finance minister to scrap the plan to create the carbon capture tax credit. Professor Christina Hoka from the University of Victoria stated that carbon capture is expensive and unproven in its effectiveness in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Julia Levine, Senior Climate and Energy Program Manager, states that by relying on unproven, quote, techno fixes, end quote, the government is, quote, gambling with our lives. Carbon capture projects exist at the demonstration level only and have not successfully been deployed at the scale needed to make them part of a viable pathway to reach net zero by 2050. More than 80% of the carbon capture projects attempted in the United States have ended in failure. Shell's Quest carbon capture facility near Edmonton is emitting more greenhouse gas than it captures. Across the board, scientists are calling for the government to invest in proven climate solutions, including renewable energy. Efficient, affordable housing and the electrification of transportation is the way to go. The choices we make today will have a lasting impact on future generations. It has long been my belief and the NDP's belief that a just transition must not only create a healthier environment, but also create better opportunities and improve affordability for Canadian workers and families. A just transition creates good jobs in the renewable energy sector and supports workers and communities in transitioning in the jobs sector. Canada could become a world leader in renewable energy development. Investing in energy-efficient home retrofits and affordable energy-efficient new homes, as well as investing in a robust electric public transit system, would make life more affordable for Canadians and reduce emissions. In other words, a just transition would help build a stronger, resilient economy. It is an opportunity that any government who values people and the planet would jump on. Instead, Canada is spending 14 times more on financial support to the fossil fuel sector than it does for renewable energy. The Liberals promised a Just Transition Act in 2019, but have failed to deliver and were recently rebuffed by the Environment Commissioner for the lack of a plan to support workers and communities through the transition to a low-carbon economy. At the same time, oil and gas companies are making record profits, and Canadians are being decimated at the pump with record high prices, while the world is on the brink of a climate disaster. The majority of Canadians are concerned about climate change and affordability as the cost of living continues to rise. If the Liberals eliminated tax credits for the oil and gas exploration and development right now, it would actually bring in almost $10 billion over the next 4 years.
The honourable member's time is up. I've been trying to signal that to her. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member of King's Hands.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her remarks today. She made very clear that she's against any type of public financing for the oil and gas sector. The way I view it is that this actual particular tax credit is to incentivize to reduce emissions, but I respect her point and her view on this. My question is a little bit broader. Does she feel the Government of Canada has a role in working with private sector entities to reduce emissions? She's made very clear that she doesn't support that in the oil and gas sector. Where would she delineate, if at all, whether or not the Government of Canada should be providing these types of incentives for other private sector industries?
Vancouver East.
Well, the government, instead of subsidizing very profitable big oil companies, the government can provide immediate relief to struggling Canadians by suspending the GST on residential energy bills, doubling the GST tax credit, and increasing the Canada Child benefit to all recipients by $500. That would be immediate help for Canadians. And for the oil and gas industry, by the way, they should be paying for the work that needs to be done to make the planet better. They are making record profits. They can afford to do it. There is no good reason why the Canadian government, the Liberal government, continues to subsidize them. That money should be invested in the people and for renewable energy.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I've heard the member in her speech refer to the same misinformation that we identified earlier. That's an actual, as we talked about, a lie propagated by a subsidiary of Tides International. It's the only place this 14 times number comes up. So I hope she's happy in this House of Commons that she and her colleagues continue to repeat that misinformation, but recognize what it is. But I'm going to challenge her on the whole thing on carbon capture, utilization, and storage, because she talked about it being demonstration level only in Canada, and she referred also to Shell Quest facility. Shell Quest is actually using the technology they have at Edmonton in the Northern Lights project, which is offshore Norway now, which has a better tax regime than Canada in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Can she comment why we've developed technology in Canada that's now leaving to be exploited around the world in other environmental countries that are approaching the same problem? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Our member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I didn't realize that the member is a scientist. I didn't realize that we should trust him, who is actually, frankly, right into the pockets of big oil, instead of the scientist who's actually brought forward the evidence. The last I checked, I would rather trust the scientists rather than the conservatives. But let me just say this, Madam Speaker, on the issue around carbon capture, if that is the technology to go, as the member suggests, why don't the oil and gas industry pay for it themselves? Why do they need a subsidy from the Canadian government? That money, I hope the members should realize, should be invested into communities, invested into Canadians who need that support, who are being gouged right now at the pumps.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for l'honorable député de.
The honourable member for today's de Blainville. A quick question, please. That's what I thought, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I totally agree with the speech that called out carbon capture technologies that will help oil companies, but I don't understand. I'd like the member to explain how that can be condemned and how they can still support it in the last budget.
To respond, I just want to indicate if anybody has any questions or answers or comments, they should wait until I recognize them. Otherwise, I would ask them to be quiet until such time as I acknowledge their presence in the House to do so. The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On the issue around the NDP negotiating with the government in the supply confidence agreement, we have advanced the notion to call on the government to end the oil and gas subsidies. We got a little bit, only $9 million in terms of a return, and then of course the government went and gave a giant gift to the oil and gas sector. But it does not mean to say that we will not continue to strongly advocate for this and to tell the government and to call them out whenever they step in the wrong direction. That's why we have this motion on the floor today, and I hope all members of this House will support it.
Resuming debate, the honourable member King's Hands.
Merci, Madame le Président.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to recognize that I will be sharing my time this afternoon